Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're going to look at a couple of really vital redstone circuits, but we're going to do that in the context of something that's going to be useful to us here in the Dripstone cave. Follow me down to the copper factory, or rather the copper aging factory floor, because I've made a couple of changes around here, or rather I have been a little busy. I've been working out how many of these machines we're going to have, and I've been building them, which honestly doesn't take all that long once you get the rhythm down. We're also working on a bit of decoration here. I liked having the magenta glazed terracotta here directing the flying machines down here, kind of pointing in the direction that the flying machines distribute the copper, because otherwise there isn't really much use in the game for magenta glazed terracotta. It looks good in a couple of very specific situations, and then you can't really avoid the fact that it has giant arrows painted on it when you're using it for decoration. So I figured, since this is all machinery, we could do something cool with that. This is sort of similar to the design I built on Empire's SMP, and I now have a decent amount of terracotta, thanks to our connection to the mesa via that ice boat road from the previous episode, that I can make as much glazed terracotta as I want to. So the next thing is making as much copper as I want to, and that requires some kind of heavy-duty smelting setup. It also requires a decent amount of copper ore to input, but we've got a decent amount of raw copper here thanks to how much of it we managed to mine out of this space, and considering we're in a dripstone cave biome, I expect we're only going to find more of it if we dig into any of the walls around here. There's even some up in the ceiling back there. So how are we going to smelt all this? Well, blast furnaces obviously seem like the most efficient way of doing that. Obviously, they're going to smelt things twice as fast as furnaces, and our auto smelter setup back at my spawn base uses furnaces. So we're going to set up a blast furnace auto smelter here, but that's not really the purpose of the video, because we've done auto smelting before. I think we pretty much know how to do that at this point. The purpose of this video is how to get fuel to the blast furnace from up here, because up here in the main body of the cave, I've converted this giant pillar of dripstone into an automatic lava farm. Although it's only automatic up to a point, because it produces the lava automatically. The problem is collecting it. Each of these cauldrons produces a bucket of lava roughly every 20 minutes. Basically every in-game day, we expect some of these cauldrons to refresh with lava, and right now I've encountered the problem of my inventory filling up with lava buckets pretty quickly, and I only get to harvest about half of them before the lava buckets start dropping on the floor, and I need to rearrange my inventory a little bit to make sure I'm carrying all of them. Not only that, but once we picked up all of this lava manually, right now if we want to smelt the copper closer to the area where it's all going to be distributed, I have to run back over here, drop down into the main part of the strip mine where we'd dug out that whole area and where we're building the copper field. And let's say we're setting up our blast furnace down here, it's going to mean ferrying these buckets of lava down here every time we want to refill the auto smelter. And granted, one single bucket of lava when used as furnace fuel of any kind will perform 100 smelting operations, so in theory we can use the lava pretty effectively. With this amount of lava we could smelt, thousands of copper blocks at this point, probably 1,500 or so. But the fact remains that once we've got another one of these built over here, once we've duplicated all of the copper aging circuits onto this side of the room, we're going to want a way of mass producing blocks of copper. It also costs 9 copper ingots to make a single block of copper, so we still need to do an awful lot of smelting in order to get the copper that we need. So I think it's going to make sense to set up our blast furnaces and stuff down here so that we can collect all of the copper, craft it, and put it in the machine straight away. That leaves us with the problem of how to get the lava from up there down here more effectively than a player just carrying it. We could, of course, transplant our lava farm down there. We could set up another lava farm, assume this one is just for the aesthetics of the cave here. We could set up another lava farm further down, but I like the idea of keeping this one and simply bridging the gap between the two with an effective use of redstone. And so we're going to set up a lava bucket drop-off point, which I think is probably going to be around here, just so it's as close as possible to the area where our strip mine is, whilst also making sure that it's close to the lava farm here. We're going to set up a chest feeding into a hopper, which is going to feed into a dropper clock, a circuit which will basically spit out any buckets of lava that get put in there into a water stream and carry them off down to the area where they're going to fill an auto smelter. And yes, we could just throw all of the lava buckets out of our inventory, even hold Control and Q to throw them en masse, but I think it's actually even a little easier to shift click all of them into a chest like this. So having retrieved our redstone box from downstairs in the strip mine, I'm going to build a couple of dropper clock circuits, and you can choose for yourself which one you think will work better. Personally, there's a couple of designs that I default to pretty much every time, and it is important here that we are using a dropper and not a dispenser, because of course if we put buckets of lava into a dispenser, when the dispenser activates, it will spit out the lava source block in front of it and retract it into an empty bucket inside the dispenser. It will not spit out the lava buckets as items that could be input into a hopper that's fueling an auto furnace setup or something like that. So we need to make sure that we are using droppers, not dispensers. In order to detect the contents of a dropper, it will need a comparator measuring it. Beyond that, all we need is a couple of redstone components and a couple of solid blocks. We're going to have the comparator output into a solid block here. We're going to place one piece of redstone dust there, have another solid block right there, have a repeater facing out of that solid block, place a redstone dust here so it feeds a signal back into the side of the comparator, and finally a solid block here with a piece of redstone dust on top of it. Now, one way you could get around the use of the redstone dust here, if you already have some target blocks available to you, is to put a target block there, and that will actually redirect this redstone dust into the target block as well. The idea is to have a block here which is going to power the dropper, causing it to activate every time the circuit activates and spit out one item from its inventory. And while it saves you one piece of redstone dust if you have a target block there, it will technically save you 3 pieces of redstone dust to do it this way, because it costs 4 redstone dust to craft the target block. But anyway, I actually like the target block a little bit more. It feels like a more intelligent use of the target block, and it means that you don't have to make the circuit one block higher by allowing room for this redstone. So it allows you to make this circuit in a slightly more compact space, and then you can put a roof of solid blocks over the top of it. You can build this into the floor, whatever you need to do, really. But now when we place any items whatsoever in this dropper, it's going to spit them out slowly but regularly, one at a time, until all of the blocks have been shot out of the dropper. The reason it does this is that the comparator is detecting something is in the dropper. It switches on, providing strong power to this block, which activates this redstone dust. The redstone dust transmits power into the block next door. The redstone repeater picks it up, converts it to a full-strength signal, which the comparator measures, compares to the contents of the dropper, realizes that this is a full-strength signal, and switches off. The entire circuit switches itself off, and then switches back on again once there's no longer a signal coming through here. It effectively creates a redstone clock, and the target block is powering the dropper each time, causing it to spit out one piece of the contents of its inventory. There are a couple of other ways you can build circuits like this, and one way is to have redstone dust looping back around like this, with the repeater in this position instead, and potentially another repeater here, because without a second repeater, you'll find that if the contents of the dropper completely fill up, let's say for example that we have 9 lava buckets in here, it will spit out 1, but then the redstone signal coming in from the side here is actually only power level 12, because it's had to wrap around with the remainder of this redstone dust, and the comparator detecting the contents of the dropper is outputting a higher redstone signal than the signal that's coming in from the side, so it can't disable the circuit anymore. If you swap these positions over and you have the repeater feeding in a strong signal into the comparator, it will spit out a few of its contents, but then it will stop at 1, or potentially even like half a stack of items in here, because the comparator is not outputting a strong enough signal to reach the repeater on this side of the circuit. So typically I have found the best way of building these things up is to use the 2-block method like so, because then it will spit out all of the contents of the dropper regardless of what you put in there, what stack sizes there are, and so forth. You might find the speed at which the dropper spits out items to be a little bit lacking, because of course it has to go through the delay of this repeater. The speed is actually kind of ideal for the speed at which hoppers will pick up items, so if you're trying to spit stuff out into a hopper, it's usually a good idea to keep the dropper clock that slow. Alternatively, if you want a faster version, you can set up a faster version using observers, and this makes it into a vertical circuit instead of a horizontal circuit, and it's ever so slightly more compact. What you want to do is take the block out from here next to this comparator. We're going to place a sticky piston in the ground there. We're going to place 2 observers facing into each other, one from here and one that way, and then whenever the comparator detects that the dropper has content, it's going to connect the 2 observers together, which starts a really fast redstone clock, which via quasi-connectivity powers the dropper, but if you want to avoid quasi-connectivity, you can just place a block there and it will power the dropper in much the same way. The only problem with this circuit is that it relies on items being placed in the dropper quite quickly, either by, placing them in there yourself and placing a stack of items in there, or by having multiple hoppers feeding into the same dropper, maybe from above and from the sides, although the one above is going to have a difficult time locking and unlocking with the speed of this redstone circuit. But if we end up placing a single hopper into the side here and feeding in items slowly, you'll find that the circuit gets a lot noisier, and that's because the comparator is only detecting one item coming into the dropper at a time, and that means it's activating and deactivating the sticky piston over and over again as the items are fed in and spat out. It can get a little bit unwieldy splitting the output of whatever you're trying to put into the dropper clock circuit, so sometimes I find this best to just throw items in there manually and have a faster circuit if you need it. So this circuit is probably best used for circumstances in which you want to put the items into the dropper manually, you have multiple hopper inputs, or you're going to be far enough away from it that you don't mind the noise. In this case, we're going to be setting up our hopper to output into a dropper here, and the dropper's going to be facing down so that it can throw the items down a long shaft which is going to terminate in a water stream that feeds into the fuel outputs of a blast furnace auto smelter. And yikes, it's a good thing I had some good armor, otherwise that dripstone might have been the end of me. But right now, this is coming down into an area in the middle of where our second copper field is going to be receiving all of the copper blocks, so we need to redirect the water streams towards the side of the cave wall, where closer to the area we're going to be loading these machines, the blast furnaces are going to be smelting all of the copper ingots. Luckily for me, it seems like we've got enough space back here to conceal a dropper clock, and so that means we should just be able to have the hopper facing into the dropper that way. We'll put the entire circuit underneath this manually built column of dripstone. We can close off the circuit as we come up, and then we'll put the rest of our dropper clock circuit inside of here. So we'll leave two pieces of dripstone here. We want to have some redstone dust there and there going back into the comparator. We'll put the comparator right there. We'll have a target block right there, and it looks like this one's already filling up with lava buckets. Very good. And once we put in our redstone repeater right here, all of the lava buckets will end up getting shot down into the lower section of the cave, and we'll throw a couple more of those in and see where they've ended up. Yep, we now have tons of lava underneath this section of the dripstone cave, ready to be redirected into a water stream that's going to take them to the blast furnaces. To make sure our lava buckets go where they need to go, we've now got a pipe here that I've decided to make out of dark prismarine. I was trying to think of a suitably watery feeling material to transport all of the stuff around, and it could be in copper pipes, but I worry that the copper might be too close to the copper that we're trying to age in here, so any kind of decorative copper up there could potentially slow down the aging process for the remainder of this. But we've got this going through one of the dripstone spikes that was coming down from the ceiling. I actually quite like that. And to make sure that all of the lava buckets get where they need to go, you have a couple of options when it comes to the pipes like this, because flowing water can only carry items for 8 blocks before the water flows to a stop, so you can resolve that by coming down a block like we're doing here and starting a fresh water stream, or you can put an ice block in there, and if you separate the ice block with a sign right here, you can place another water source block there, and then if we throw one of our lava buckets into the water stream here, it'll keep its momentum on top of the ice, be carried along, and hop on down into the next level of the water. We've obviously got some blocks here making sure it stops, but it ends up going all the way down here, and I think another couple of ice blocks in here and another couple of water streams along should bring it to around the right area that we want to make sure all of the lava buckets end up going in the hoppers. So another sign right here, another bucket of water right there, and the water stream can continue for another 8 blocks. We'll put another ice block here, and so on and so forth. The packed ice isn't necessary for the momentum. You could use regular ice if you wanted to, but regular ice also has the disadvantage of melting in higher light levels, so if you want to keep this area well lit up, packed ice is usually the best way to go. And a short amount of time later, we have 9 blast furnaces all rigged up here, and we could expand this if we want to, but 9 is just a convenient number. Once we've got the water streams all in place, having a water stream starting on one hopper and running all the way down here means that any of the final lava buckets will get dropped off right here. And we should probably put in some sort of extra storage thing here just to make sure that the other lava buckets, if they end up coming over here and all of these hoppers are full, don't end up just despawning. But frankly, it's not something we need to worry too much about, given that we are farming lava renewably. Ideally, we wouldn't waste anything, but even the iron from buckets is coming from an iron farm at this point, so frankly, we are doing pretty well. And at this point, I think this whole setup deserves a test. I have so much much raw copper at my spawn base that I don't really mind too much if we break down a lot of these raw copper blocks and feed them all into the furnaces. We're going to do that manually for now, but of course, all we need to do really is set up a hopper minecart or a chest minecart to run over the top of those hoppers and make sure they can deliver all of the goods to the furnaces. So having fed a stack of raw copper into each of these, we're going to head up to our lava farm, grab a bunch of buckets, and see what we can feed down into this system. Each hopper down there is going to be able to hold 5 lava buckets, but the blast furnace will consume 1 lava bucket as soon as it gets it, and it'll load another lava bucket into the fuel slot right away. So really, 7 lava buckets is what's going to be required to fill up one of those hoppers with the blast furnaces. And once that one's all full up, it should pass on to the next furnace in the row, and so on and so on. We've just emptied probably about a double chest of lava buckets down there, so most of our furnaces should now be lit up. Let's go and check that everything's gone okay. Yep, looks like it has. Our first 6 furnaces are all loaded. So that means, yeah, we didn't quite get 54 lava buckets into the system, but each one of these hoppers should now be filled up with enough lava buckets that it's going to last for a little while. We have a little bit of dark prismarine in a couple of those where I was breaking out some of the pipe here, but yes, we need to fill up a few more lava buckets, and those should now go on to fuel the rest of these. And of course, the cool part here is we can recycle these buckets. Once we've made enough that fills up the entire blast furnace system, then all of those are just going to be taken out of the output chest down there and recycled back into farming more lava up here. So when you look at it that way, this is a set of lava buckets that we're going to be able to use more or less forever. That should now be too many lava buckets for the system to handle, so let's go and see what we've ended up with coming out the other side, and that way we can guarantee that we're only putting in the right number of lava buckets every time. Pretty sure that'd be 63 lava buckets total. Yeah, we do have a few spilled out over here at the end, and it looks like we've got another 8 lava buckets right there. Pretty good. The whole system is now filled up and it's running. We already have a bunch of copper accumulating in this chest, and we can even take out the buckets that the system has already used. Well, not too shabby. Of course, to use the lava most efficiently, we'll need to make sure that there are at least 100 ingots per furnace, so ideally, at maximum capacity, this has to be smelting a minimum of 900 raw copper. Although realistically, 900 copper ingots is 100 blocks of copper, and I think the system right now can only hold 90 blocks, meaning that if we end up smelting more than we can age at once, then that means we are keeping up with the output of our copper aging farm here. So while the remainder of that copper smelts, I'm going to set up an input line here so that we can add more copper to the system as we go, and I think what we've got here is a pretty effective blast furnace. Hey folks, welcome back. So I've just started working on the other side of the room where the circuits are going to look a little different, but for now I have wired them up the same as this half of the room. I've more or less stopped because I was running low on redstone components. I do need to go and trade with a bunch of clerics and maybe do some more mining and get a bit more redstone, because every repeater, every comparator, every redstone torch, all of them take up redstone dust as components, so it's actually getting a little bit expensive to put all this stuff together, but in the long run, it will be worth it. And now even more worth it because I decorated the auto smelter a little bit. I figured we could put some trapdoors in front of the hoppers there, so you don't necessarily see the output hoppers, but I kind of like seeing the input hoppers, maybe behind this wall of dripstone coming down from the ceiling, which we might add a couple of dripstone spikes to here and there. I really like the whole vibe of honeycomb and spruce or dark oak wood, and also the blue terracotta. So we've blended that, and I think those actually go quite well with the prismarine. They all contrast from each other. There's kind of like a color triangle thing going on with those three that I like quite a lot. And maybe we can use these two blocks to support the prismarine pipeline in some way or another. But in future, I think a couple of the aesthetics here are going to change. I've also noticed that it's, unfortunately, not on a center with the room, because I've been judging the center of this by the beacon the entire time, but when I ended up spacing these out to make sure that the copper blocks didn't meet in the middle when I recall the entire room's worth of copper, it turned out the center needed to be more like here, so I think it's actually like a couple of blocks to the side of where the beacon beam is currently. Not to worry, we can always move some of this stuff around, but honestly, I think the way this room is going to end up being decorated, this is not necessarily going to be a centerpiece. But I've got a couple of other features that I wanted to share about this, namely the redstone lamps here. These are all wired up to comparators that are taking a readout from the input hoppers where all of the lava is going. Let me just grab a couple of blocks here and we can kind of, you know, parkour our way up the side of this, and we can take a quick look at the back here, because each of these has a comparator readout either directly underneath this block, like if I take this block away, there's a comparator right there, That's feeding a redstone signal into this block, which is feeding it downwards. Oh, I just broke out way more of that than I intended to. But it's feeding that downwards to a redstone dot. It doesn't have to be a dot, it can be a plus shape as well. But that's basically feeding the whole thing back via a redstone repeater. And I've kind of staircased down with dots and repeaters so that each of these individual redstone lamps gives me its own readout. So when the fuel hopper behind this specific blast furnace runs out of fuel, that light will go off and none of the others will. The redstone dust all ends up basically powering the block directly underneath the redstone lamps, which is how come it's not going to light two of them at a time. But if I take out the lava buckets from that hopper in particular, if we go for the second hopper along, I'll take out the remaining lava buckets here. We'll just throw one on the ground temporarily because I don't have enough space in my inventory. It's all kind of chaotic right now. But you'll notice as we come around the front, just that one lamp has turned off. And that's how we know how much of the system needs refilling with lava buckets, meaning that we can just chuck a bunch of lava buckets into the input and hopefully all of these lights will turn on as the hoppers fill back up with stuff. Now the hopper readout there is looking for the minimum amount and not the maximum amount, so it will only turn the light off when there are no lava buckets left in there, which will still mean that the blast furnace has, you know, probably just consumed one lava bucket and has loaded the last lava bucket in there, so it still has room for about 200 more smelting operations, meaning there's plenty of time for us to go and refill the lava buckets from upstairs if we need to. And in the meantime, I have been smelting a whole bunch more copper, so once again, if I can find a spare shulker box to dump all of this stuff into, we're going to have a bunch more copper that we can turn into copper blocks and load into the flying machines as we build them around the other half of the room. And I've already unloaded these once, and we already have a couple of stacks of oxidized copper sitting here in the chest, which I might transfer to their own shulker box because I like using copper blocks, and I'm thinking maybe we'll carry around a shulker box with a couple of stacks of honeycomb in there as well. Not honeycomb blocks, but the honeycomb that we can use to wax copper blocks, and we can basically have copper with us whenever we want to. I get a little bit protective of copper. I like copper, it's a good block. But overall, the technology of this base is starting to come together, and I'm quite glad that we were able to cover the dropper clock circuit in this video. That was really one of the main things I wanted to cover because they're so useful. You don't just use them in situations like this where you need to feed some of the fuel from a farm down into an auto smelter. No, they end up getting used for item storage systems and mob farms and basically anything where you need to spit out large chains of items like that. You can even use them in the nether if you want to, because even though it's not possible to place water streams in the nether, the output from the dropper usually has enough velocity that you can slide blocks around on a bit of packed ice and then maybe even transfer it to a slime block to get pushed around, and you'll end up using this circuit more and more frequently the more you dabble in redstone and moving items around and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's actually really useful to know about that dropper clock circuit, and that's going to really help us in the future of the series. For now, that's where we're going to leave it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide, folks. I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at this base coming together a little bit more. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you've enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care, bye for now.